Eagles Entertainment.
With the 10th pick in the 2021 NFL Draft, the Philadelphia Eagles select.
You're listening to the Journey to the Draft podcast.
Welcome to the Journey to the Draft podcast, presented by Life Brand. I'm your host, Fran Duffy, and today we're going to have a special edition here of the podcast where we're going to go back into the time machine and look back at the 2017 NFL Draft, the one that was held right here in the city of brotherly love. 4 years now removed. Who were some of the best picks? Who were some of the ones that outperformed our expectations or didn't quite live up to it? That's what we're all going to talk about right here with my buddy Dane Brugler from The Athletic, one of the best in the business. It's going to be a lot of fun. Just kind of talk big picture because it's not necessarily about the hits and misses as much as it is learning from those hits and misses, right? And that's something that Dane and I both take very, very seriously, especially this time of year. So we're going to get into all of that in Draft Buzz. Before we get there, later this week, we start up our process series where I talk with just some of the best minds in the business, you know, whether it's on the media side, former scouts, former general managers, kind of talk turkey, talk player evaluation, learn more about the process and get a little bit better. The self-evaluation part, that is what this time of year is all about for me. And we're going to start that off with Pro Football Focus's Austin Gale, who's going to join the show and talk about some of the metrics that matter most with their data. You can go and get all their data over with Pro Football Focus for these college players coming out of the league or coming out of college and going into the league. And we talk about some of those metrics that matter most to him. It's a really fun chat. We're going to be dropping that later this week right here on the show. We're about a month away as well from our conference previews. It's going to be like first or second week of July. So make sure you're tuned into those. They will start about a month from now right here on the Journey to the Draft podcast. As always, a quick reminder, rate, review, subscribe. If you're not already, hopefully the last month or so has proven why you need to be subscribed to the Journey to the Draft podcast all season long. And if you are already, do us a favor. Just go on over to Apple Podcasts, leave us a rating, leave us a review. If you've got a question, we'll answer it right here on the show, which we're going to do, by the way. We're going to get to one of your comments later at the end of the show after Draft Buzz. That being said, let's get into it. It's time. Like I said, we're going to go back to the 2017 draft with our buddy Dane Brugler in Draft Buzz.
Now it's time for Draft Buzz.
All right, well, excited for what is always a fun exercise. We take a look back to a draft that happened now 4 years ago, the 2017 NFL draft, which was held here in Philadelphia as I welcome in my friend Dane Brugler. Dane, always a fun exercise to go back and take a look at a draft from a handful of years ago.
Not only fun, but I think important. You know, we have to really examine, okay, what was our perception of these players then before they took an NFL snap compared to now? And, you know, we've mentioned it many times before, but one of the most important traits of an evaluator is to be a self-evaluator and understand, okay, what did we miss on and why? What did we get right on and why? And it's not just about, you know, celebrating what you got right, but understanding what you got wrong. So you can move forward with just a different outlook on maybe a certain scouting technique, maybe a certain trait at a position that you overlooked. And so, yeah, this is going to be really interesting because I think you did a nice job with these categories that we're going to go over for each single round. And it's going to be a fun look back for sure.
To me, like this time of year, at least in my mind, is so important for me from a self-scouting standpoint, from just trying to professional development, get a little bit better in whatever I'm doing. And when it comes to evaluation and watching the game, that's what this time is all about. So whether it's picking the brain of others, looking back at my own process, my own hits and misses, why did those happen? Try to get to the bottom of some of those whys. That's a huge, huge part of this time of year for me. And it kind of reflects in the kinds of podcasts we do, which is exactly what we're doing here today. So for me, just kind of looking at this draft overall, and we'll start in the first round, 12 of the 32 first rounders in this draft have already gone to a Pro Bowl. You get some of the best players at their respective positions. I mean, Myles Garrett, Jamal Adams, Christian McCaffrey, Patrick Mahomes, Marshawn Lattimore, Deshaun Watson, all in the top 12 of this draft. Now, on the other side of the coin, and it just kind of speaks to the volatility of round one, 15 of these players are on new teams already. Now, it includes some of those Pro Bowl players like Jamal Adams, but when you look at just even the top five after Myles Garrett, Mitchell Trubisky, Solomon Thomas, Leonard Fournette, Corey Davis, all four of those guys did not make it to their second contract with their respective drafting teams. So again, just kind of speaks to not every first round is going to be loaded. And also for everybody, this is why when we see analysts come out with rare or takes on players and their rankings don't match the consensus, or reports come out, this team views this player against that. that is a great example of exactly why that's the case. Not all the guys that go in round one are always going to hit.
And that's why it's important not to necessarily judge yourself based off of what happens on draft day.
Yes.
You know, you had X amount of players in your top 32 actually go in the first round. That's great. But the more insightful part is to look back and now, okay, you know, if a player was drafted, 32nd and you had him great as a top 10 pick, but then that player that was drafted 32nd plays like a top 10 pick, you look wrong on draft day, but now you look like you know what you're talking about. So yeah, it's easy in the moment to look at it, and we all do it that way. It's just, prisoner of the moment type thing. But looking back, that's where I think we could really gain some information and really grow as evaluators.
All right. Well, what we're going to do is we're going to go round by round. And as you mentioned, I've got a handful of categories here that we'll try and hit on, and we'll do our best to not have too much overlap, but 4 different categories with each round of the draft. We're going to have the best pick, and that's going to be the selection that worked out best for the team 4 years after the fact. We've got your biggest hits. That's the player who you, Dane, and me, myself, had the best evaluation on. Could be positive, could be negative, but our biggest hit in that round. Then a swing and a miss, the opposite side. Who's a player that we really liked that didn't necessarily reach that status? And then overachiever, a guy who outperformed what you or I's expectation was of that player. And we'll start in the first round, and we'll go with the best pick. Dan, I'll let you kick things off. In your mind, what was the best pick of round one?
Well, let's not overthink this. Patrick Mahomes, that has to be the answer here. Going to the Chiefs at pick number 10, not the first quarterback selected that year. Obviously, there's a lot of uncertainty coming out of Texas Tech, a player who coming from a program, that air raid offense where it looks like he's playing backyard football. Obviously, there was a lot of tools to be really intrigued by, but obviously it takes a lot more to being an NFL quarterback. And the Chiefs were all in. They bought into that, and I think he's a great example of how tough it is for those of us on the outside compared to NFL teams, because they get a chance to really sit down with these guys, these quarterbacks, pick their brain, understand, okay, what do you know? What don't you know? What kind of learner are you? Your mental capacity, all these things. And with Patrick Mahomes, the Chiefs, even though they knew he was raw in several areas, they felt very good about his ability to learn and grow and that type of thing. So, he went higher than I know I had him graded. And obviously they hit a home run. The best player, if there was an NFL draft tomorrow and every team, every player, it was an expansion style draft, Patrick Mahomes is the easy number 1 overall pick. It's not even a question mark. So, I think he's the right answer here for the best pick of the 2017 draft, first round or any round.
Honestly, I was going to save him for my swing and a miss, and I didn't use him there because I figured that you would pick him here with this selection. And look, I agree with you. I was low on Patrick Mahomes coming out. I was skeptical just because of his playing style. All of the tools were there. We talked about the arm talent and the accuracy. Every single throw in the playbook he could make. He just had a very unorthodox style in terms of playing really outside of structure. And I felt that he relied on that ability to play outside of structure, that it was going to be tough for him to play inside structure. I know that there were some in the league that felt the same way. He was a very, very decisive player, or divisive player, I should say. And to me, like that, he was one of my biggest learning experiences for the quarterback position. It's one I still reflect on to this day. So Patrick Mahomes, absolutely the best pick in round one. I would say if you're going to go with, who's the runner up there, obviously you go Myles Garrett, number 1. Yeah. That was a great selection by the Cleveland Browns. I'll throw in a guy that went late in the round as well. TJ Watt, who, the Pittsburgh Steelers selected late in, I think it was the 30th overall pick. I was low on TJ Watt as well. And this was a guy that certainly outperformed my expectations. So I would say TJ Watt, the value that they get with a guy that's been a perennial, one of the best pass rushers in the league, and especially in terms of production, has constantly been getting after the quarterback to get him where they got him in the round. I would say that's outstanding value as well.
No doubt. And I liked him a lot. He was like my number 20th player, something like that. And He goes number 30. And I do a lot of work with the Cowboys. And it's funny because we knew the Cowboys were drafting a pass rusher that year, and the scouts really like TJ Watt, and the coaches were, no, not going to fit our scheme. That's why we're going for Taco Charlton. And, those of us on the Cowboys coverage were just kind of throwing a fit. Like, you're going to take Taco Charlton over TJ Watt. And obviously, no surprise how those two players, their trajectories we're a little different. But yeah, the Steelers absolutely got a steal at pick number 30. For a player of that caliber to fall that far, we're talking about maybe the best defensive player in the NFL, not named Aaron Donald.
So let's get to our biggest hits. And this was a guy that, again, we were high on that has really turned out, or the opposite as well. I'll let you decide. Who was your biggest hit in this round?
Yeah, TJ Watt definitely qualifies for me. But even the bigger hit for me, I thought, was Ryan Ramczyk, the tackle out of Wisconsin. He was my number 9 overall player in this draft. And the Saints got him at number 32. So he's one of the best right tackles in the NFL. Such a unique player too, because remember, he was a D3 guy who transferred to Wisconsin, had really just 1 year as a starting left tackle for the Badgers. But his 2016 tape, it was really good. Coordinated movements, really liked his body control. Not the longest, not the strongest, but certainly enough to get the job done. It was funny looking back at my 2017 draft guide. Not only was he my top ranked offensive lineman that year, he was my top ranked offensive player that year. So I think so far he hasn't let me down.
Yeah, he has certainly lived up to that expectation for sure. I liked him, but I did not like him as much as you did. This was a player that was seen again, another one who was seen as divisive because of that limited experience at the D1 level. For me, my biggest hit was Tre'Davious White. I was pounding the table for Tre'Davious White going back to like his sophomore year at LSU. I just saw a player that checked so many boxes. I know he wasn't a plus athlete, but to me, just when you talk about the instincts, the competitiveness, the ball skills, the versatility, play inside, outside, the man zone, whatever you needed, this guy could do it. And he has landed in a great scheme. And I think that that's important too, Dane, for everybody listening at home. So many of the players that we've talked about, we've talked about maybe the divisive nature with which they were seen coming out. Patrick Mahomes, TJ Watt. You would throw in, Tre'Davious White in here as well. The systems that they fell into, the coaching staff that they fell into with, really helped kind of bring on that success as well. TJ Watt ending up in Pittsburgh, great fit. Patrick Mahomes with Andy Reid. Who knows if Patrick Mahomes is Patrick Mahomes without Andy Reid in that situation that he was able to grow into. So Tre'Davious White working in that zone heavy scheme with Sean McDermott, I think that certainly plays to his success. But this was a guy, he was my number 1 corner. He was my favorite corner of that group. I liked him even a little bit more than Marshawn Lattimore, who has turned into a great player as well. But I would say that Tre'Davious White would be my biggest hit from the first round. On the opposite side of the coin, my swing and a miss would be a pass rusher that went right around in the same area. That was Charles Harris from Missouri. I thought that his upside was really, really high. The big discussion, especially here in Philadelphia, was, if you're going to go pass rusher, is it Derek Barnett and Charles Harris? I thought the two were very, very close in terms of the overall evaluation. I thought Barnett, a safer selection, maybe Harris, a little bit higher upside. I think Barnett, especially when healthy, but even when you look at the overall, body of work, Derek Barnett has certainly surpassed what Charles Harris has been. He did not reach that upside. He is now, I believe, down with the Atlanta Falcons. But I would say that would be my swing and a miss, would be Charles Harris from this first round.
Yeah, and that was a really interesting first round of pass rushers after Myles Garrett, because you had Barnett and Tack McKinley, Taco Charlton and TJ Watt we mentioned. Charles Harris was in there. So yeah, it was a really interesting second tier that I know there's a lot of split opinion. You definitely weren't the only one fan of Charles Harris and what he could be, especially from a program that was known for producing edge rushers at Missouri. So from my swing and a miss, and like you said, I think we both could put Pat Mahomes here, but I'm going to go with Malik Hooker, who was my number 2 overall player in the draft behind only Myles Garrett. The 2016 film at Ohio State, hook, line, and sinker, I was in. A really gifted athlete. The instincts were outstanding. Big time ball skills. He had 7 interceptions his final year as a Buckeye. And he really showed some special traits as that safety who could do just a little bit of everything. It wasn't the most physical guy in run support, but in terms of affecting the pass and in coverage, that's where the value with him really, I thought was going to be. Unfortunately, injuries have been an issue. And then it's almost like his development stalled out. I don't know. It's like he peaked that final year with the Buckeyes, and that was kind of as good as he was going to get. He goes to the Colts in the mid first round, and he's been okay the last few years, but he hasn't lived up to being a top half of round 1 type of guy. And he's a free agent right now. So if you want him, you can go and get him.
one of 3 players from this first round that are currently on the free agent market. I know there's been some buzz lately about teams that he's visiting with, so we'll see where he ends up for training camp here this summer. For me, I guess looking at the next one here, overachiever, and it's a guy that surpassed our expectations personally. For me, I would say it would be TJ Watt. We've already kind of talked about him a little bit. Is there a player for you that fits that bill?
I think it's Garrett Bowles. I liked him. I mean, he was like an early second round grade for me. And the Broncos took him like 20 overall. He was a tough prospect because he was so raw. The core strength I worried about, and he was a 24-year-old rookie, and so there were plenty of question marks there. And it wasn't a surprise to see him struggle those first few years in Denver. But to his credit, that upside that we talked about so much started to really shine through here these last 2 years. They gave him that extension. And last year he played like a top 10 tackle in the league. So, credit to Garrett Bowles for, we talk about upside potential so much. Well, he finally got there and is playing like, he was worthy of that mid first round selection.
And to me, I think the big interesting theme with him, and you could take a look at this with like a Colton Miller as well. We've talked about it with like a Taylor Decker in the past. If you take a tackle in round 1, even if they're not an all-pro, perennial Pro Bowl type of talent, if they can prove to just be a solid starter by the time they reach the end of that first deal, it's a worthwhile pick. I mean, they just gave Garrett Bowles a bunch of money out in Denver. They gave Colton Miller a bunch of money last year. Those tackles are worth their weight in gold by the time they get to that point. Even guys that are a little bit up and down, Cam Robinson has his ups and downs down in Jacksonville as a former second round pick, a top 40 pick. And he got the franchise tag this year. When you're an offensive tackle that shows that you can be serviceable, you are worth that first round selection. So Denver, look, they took a chance there, with Garrett Bowles, and he has worked out in terms of the overall, the investment they placed in him. Let's go to round 2 here. I'll let you kick things off. The best pick for you in the second round, who really benefited the most from their selection?
I'm going to go with Budda Baker to Arizona. And, there we saw 2 safeties go in the first round, or 3 safeties with Jamal Adams, Malik Hooker, and Jabril Peppers. And then the Arizona Cardinals get Budda Baker there in the second. And really, if not for that contract extension that he signed, that really made him the top safety paid or contract wise, I'm not sure people would really realize how good he's been for Arizona. He already has almost 450 tackles in 4 seasons, 5 forced fumbles. I think the only thing he was missing was the interceptions, and he finally got a pair of interceptions last year, which is great to see. 5'9.5", 195 pounds, doesn't look like much. That's really why he fell as far as he did. But he tested really well. He's a 4.45 guy, 6'7", 6'3" cone. The tape at Washington was outstanding, and a very decisive player with the way he played. Click and close. He was in the right place, right time. So Budda Baker was a good player in college who, because of the size concerns, fell a little bit. But, he was compared a lot to, say, like a Tyrann Mathieu or, but he's lived up to it. He has been a really good player and arguably, maybe the best safety over the last 4 years.
And to me, I'll go. Budda Baker is an outstanding selection for Arizona. I'll go the opposite side of the football. I'm going to go with Dalvin Cook, who the Vikings traded up to select in the top portion of round 2. Since he's entered the league, he's been one of the leading rushers. There were big questions about Dalvin Cook coming into the NFL. You had injury concerns. There were whispers about what is he like off the field. There was fumbling. There were lots of issues, lots of questions about Dalvin Cook. He comes through, and again, the production speaks for itself. We're going to talk about the scheme fit as well, and that has been certainly big, playing for the Kubiaks in that Shanahan-style offense. But I think when you look at Dalvin Cook, he's been outstanding and everything that Minnesota could have hoped for. He's been the engine for that offense, and certainly the passing game with Kirk Cousins and the receivers they've had is a big part of that. But it's tough to get that going if you don't have that production from the running back position. They hit a home run with the selection of Dalvin Cook. Let's go to our biggest hit here. And for me,
that transitions really well to the biggest hit, because that's who I'm going with. I'm going with Dalvin Cook.
There we go. Perfect.
He was my number 11 overall player in that class, my 3rd offensive player. So I was a big Dalvin Cook fan. A lot of people, Leonard Fournette, Christian McCaffrey. Obviously, it was a stacked running back class at the top. But Dalvin Cook, he was my top running back that year. Dynamic receiver. I mean, if you just give him a crease and he was going to hit it. And you're absolutely right. The pre-draft process was not kind to him. I remember being really puzzled by his combine number.
Yeah, he didn't test well. Yep.
No, like a 4.49 40, which is, whatever. But then, a 30.5-inch vert for a guy that plays explosive, plays with some burst to his game. He just did not test like a guy that had, or, has that athleticism. His 3 cone was 7.27. Just, the numbers were not matching up. And so it was a little confusing. He had some off-field stuff, but I don't know. That's just one of those players. Trust the tape, how good he was for Florida State. And yeah, he's worked out so far for Minnesota.
I don't know if you remember, but for me, the one guy I remember I was like really high on, and it felt like I was talking about him all the time here on the podcast, was Taylor Moton, the offensive tackle from Western Michigan. Played on the right side for the Broncos, goes down to the Senior Bowl, had a pretty strong week down there. I was really high on Taylor Moton. He's turned into one of the better young offensive linemen in the NFL, a staple for what they're doing down in Carolina. He's turned into a really good player, everything Carolina could have hoped for. I really liked the player coming out, and glad to see that he has worked out because, as I mentioned, I was a big fan of his game.
Yeah, no, you were spot on with him, and he's due for some a payday here coming up. So Taylor Moton in a class of tackles that really wasn't viewed as a strong group.
Right. Yep.
We've seen a couple guys, really, Ramczyk has turned out to be a really good player. We talked about Bowles, and then Taylor Moton was a steal the second.
But I did not bat 1,000 as far as my offensive line evaluations in round 2 because I was pretty high on Ethan Pochich from LSU. I thought this guy was as close to plug and play as it could get, could play guard, could play center, was really athletic, was smart. He just hasn't lived up to it. He's an NFL player. He's not a bust or anything from that standpoint. It's not that he's going to flake out of the league. He's just not lived up to that level of talent that I was expecting. And he's been a serviceable player, certainly at the very least, a nice swing backup on the interior. And he's even played some tackle for the Seahawks. But I would say that that's the guy that, looking back, I was like, man, I was really high on him. Didn't quite match up to what has played out so far.
Yeah, no, that's a good one. Mine for biggest swing and a miss, probably got to go with, and I had certainly a few in this class. Adam Shaheen, I was a big fan of coming out of Ashland, and he's revived his career a little bit in Miami. But I got to go DeShone Kizer here. I really thought DeShone Kizer was gonna, he was a high upside guy. I loved his ceiling as a quarterback. You 6'4", 230 with a good arm, a good kid. It's just the consistency wasn't there. It doesn't help that he went just a god awful situation with Hugh Jackson in Cleveland. But I like the value where they got him they got him outside the top 50 picks. So, you take a swing on a guy like that there. Just it has not panned out for him like I thought it could have.
Yeah, he was certainly a guy that a lot of people were really, really high on. You certainly were not alone there on DeShone Kizer. How about our overachiever, a guy who exceeded expectations? For me, it was Dalvin Cook. I talked about him earlier. And my questions for him, you were really high on him. Who's a guy that kind of overachieves in your mind?
I'm going to go with Marcus Maye here. Safety out of Florida.
Yeah.
He was a player I thought that, I liked him as a prospect. My issue with him, and this was a good learning point for me as an evaluator, I got too hung up on his negative plays. Every time I would, in my mind, go back to Marcus Maye, I would, the negative plays would come up. There was one against Tennessee that I can remember vividly where, he took a poor angle to the throw, and it's 6 points for the Volunteers. And there were a couple plays like that where I just couldn't get him out of my head. And so it soured my evaluation a little bit. But you know what? He's a really good player. And, even though, as a safety, you're the last line of defense. So if you have some mistakes, that could affect the scoreboard. But if you're able to kind of limit those mistakes and just be a solid player, I think that's Marcus Maye. He's been rock solid, just got the franchise tag this past off season. So, he's doing something right. Outlasted Jamal Adams in New York. But Marcus Maye, I think he's the guy that I did not have him rated. I mean, he was like a third rounder for me, something like that. So I didn't have him too low, but he's played better than even I thought he could play.
I think that's interesting when you juxtapose that with what you were talking about with Malik Hooker as well. And you talk about like the volatility at safety play. Would you rather, and this is a philosophical question for a lot of people, is would you rather have the steady Eddie that's straight line, not a lot of variance, or would you rather have the guy that is going to give up some plays, but also take the ball away? We talked about that with like an Andre Sisco out of Syracuse this past year. I think that's kind of an interesting look at that safety spot.
Yeah, no question. That's a good point. And again, what do we talk about at the top? It is learning from these things.
Yep.
What Marcus Maye is a great example of, and this has happened before with Frank Ragnow, and just, from my own personal experience, guys that I got hung up on something and I was able to, but it was a learning experience for me. Why did I miss on this player? Okay, with Marcus Maye, too hung up on some of the negative plays and not focusing enough on what he could do and the positives that he brought to the football team.
For me, Mahomes, we talked about that earlier. That's, really rings true for me there. Let's go to round 3 here. The best pick, in my mind, the Saints making the move up to go get Alvin Kamara, 2 running backs here that I've brought up in this category in the last 2 rounds. But Kamara has just been, he's been one of the most dynamic offensive players in the league since he entered it. I think it's interesting when you talk about, do you always want to have that thunder element alongside him? To me, that doesn't matter. When you look at all the different things that he can do for you on offense, he's such an explosive player, really versatile weapon that can be used in so many different ways. A great pick for them in round 3. Great value. A guy that a lot of people were very high on and were surprised that he fell as late as he did.
Yeah, and an interesting prospect because of the way he was used. He wasn't even really the starter there. He was sharing carries and touches, and wasn't a guy that had a high volume in terms of workload and touches, but a guy that was productive when he touched the ball. Alabama transfer, got into a little bit of trouble, so there was that element of the off the field. But yeah, you're right. He is the right answer here for the best pick of the 3rd round in the 2017 draft. If there's an honorable mention, I think you could say Kareem Hunt. That would make some sense out of Toledo. I'm going to go with Chris Godwin here, and this is round 3 is going to be a very wide receiver heavy for me. Starting here with Chris Godwin, he was really good out of Penn State, 6'1", 210. There's so much to like about his ability to track the football, adjust, and make plays. So aggressive when the ball is in the air, and I think that really showed more than anything. And then going back and looking at my notes on him, something really stood out. How he didn't have a fatal flaw. There wasn't one thing that you pointed to and say, okay, well, this is going to keep him from being a good pro. And that's I thought the Bucs obviously got a really good player, and he another franchise tag guy who's going to cash in next offseason.
Godwin's a really great player, has turned into a really good player for them. He checks so many boxes coming out of Penn State as well. You're talking about the ability to win at the catch point. He could play inside, outside. The route running was there. The ability to defeat press was there. He checked a ton of boxes for them. For me, my biggest hit, you mentioned him, Kareem Hunt, and I'll go with another running back here in round 3. To me, like watching Kareem Hunt, we talked about him a lot here on the podcast because he's another guy kind of like, honestly, very similar to Kenny Gainwell, where he had, you saw the vision, you saw the patience, but then his ability to make that first man miss, whether it was through wiggle, contact bounce, he was not 4.4 explosive. He wasn't 228 pounds and going to just barrel through defenders, down after down after down. He wasn't that kind of player, but he just had a knack for making that first man miss and never put the ball on the ground. I don't think, if I remember right, he didn't fumble once his entire college career. And then if I remember right, he also fumbled in his first NFL carry on Thursday Night Football against the Patriots, but never put the ball on the ground, was a longtime starter for Toledo. To me, this guy he turned into a really, really good player. And obviously he had the off-field transgressions and that you put that to the side in terms of this exercise, but a really good player that the Chiefs got in round 3 and has turned into, he's once again, a good player for the Cleveland Browns right now.
Yeah, a really selfless player for Cleveland because of the way he's used. He's sharing the backfield with Nick Chubb, but he's happy to do it because, when he takes advantage every time he touches the ball, he's really taking advantage of kind of this second chance after his off-field. For my biggest hit, I'm going to go with Kenny Golladay. Big fan of his coming out of Northern Illinois. Just tall drink of water, so quick, so flexible. You would see him win consistently on these slants, these curls, these digs. Quick ball skills, quick feet. I worried a little bit about the lack of play strength. That was something I worried about. Route running needed to get a little bit better just in terms of steps and the way his footwork. But the length, the speed, and the ball skills, I really, really liked. And so he was definitely one of the wide receivers in this class that I got right. I got several wrong, but he was one of the receivers that I got right.
I got some receivers wrong, and I'm going to get to that. But to me, I was going to bring up Galladay for my overachiever. I struggled with him when he was at Northern Illinois, and I worried about the play speed and the athleticism on film. And honestly, when he hit, that kind of sent me down a path. I've done full podcasts on, had conversations with Greg and just talking about big receivers, those possession receivers, and what is it that makes a Kenny Galladay hit versus other big receivers that haven't made it or had to transition to tight end? What is the differentiating factor between those players on film? And he was one of those guys that kind of spurned that thought process with me. Great contested catch receiver in the NFL. That's what he's been with the Detroit Lions. Now with his second team with New York, we'll see how it looks in the second stage of his career. But he has turned into a really good NFL receiver.
What was your findings from your deep dive? And was there something specific? I mean, was there, without, making it a whole nother podcast?
Of course.
Yeah. Was there something that you could really point to and boil it down to, this is something that he had that maybe some of these other guys didn't?
No, because you know what it is that one thing I'd like to go back, because I haven't incorporated going back and did I go back and say I missed something with Galladay? But I think with me, going into those big receivers, I still think you need that differentiating factor, whether it's the long speed, whether it's the really technical route running aspect, mastering the skill receiver, the skill part of playing the receiver position, mastering the nuances there. I don't know that just being the big body guy who catches everything, I don't know that that's enough. So, whether it's the physical tools or the skill and the nuance there, I think you need one of those separating factors. And to me, I just missed on Galladay. So that was a big one for me. And it certainly is a learning point from my standpoint. I also missed the opposite way on Taywan Taylor. He was my swing and a miss. And he was a guy that, certainly smaller than Galladay, but he won at all three levels of the field. He was really competitive and tough. I really liked the route running, and I have kind of fallen for a number of these guys, Dane, like the smaller, not 4.3, 4.4, low 4.4 speed guys, but really technically refined, tough. Like Rashard Higgins kind of fits into this mold, right? Those guys that can work the middle of the field, were inside, outside guys that just haven't quite hit that ceiling. Taywan Taylor would be that for me. He's stuck in the league as a backup, kind of a fourth, fifth receiver, but he was a third round pick by the Titans. I thought he was going to be really, really good. Honestly, I was really high on Corey Davis and I was really high on Taywan Taylor. I thought the Titans really had a great draft that year. That neither guy really lived up to that billing.
Yeah, I'm going to stick with the same position because I loved our Darius Stewart out of Alabama. I really thought he was going to be a good pro high school quarterback who was still making that transition. So you kind of gave him a little bit of a pass because he wasn't the most technically refined route runner. There were some elements of his game mechanically that he needed to get better at. But, he was a playmaker. I thought all three levels, he showed that on tape. He was really tough, really competitive. And he just, once he got to the NFL, he barely did anything. It really surprised that he fizzled out so quickly.
For overachiever, I mentioned Galladay as mine. Who was that fit the bill for you?
I went with a guy that just got paid this offseason in free agency, Trey Hendrickson from FAU.
Got it.
Went to the Saints, now signed with the Bengals, I believe. 6'4", 265. There were things to like about him, but I didn't necessarily see the player that we've seen the last few years for the Saints and how productive he's been. I felt like there were too many almost plays on his film, where he would almost make the play, almost make the sack, almost make the tackle for loss. But, he had a good resume. He was productive at that level. 15 tackles for loss each as a junior and a senior. The sack numbers were there. It's just, I don't know. Against better competition, I didn't necessarily see that difference maker, but he has outplayed where I had him graded and where I thought he'd be at this point in his career.
I was very close to making him my biggest hit. I actually had him ahead of Taco Charlton. I had him ahead of Tyus Bowser. I had him ahead of Ryan Anderson. I had him ahead of a bunch of guys that went pretty high. I really liked Trey Hendrickson. I liked his hand usage. I thought he had really impressive rush skill. The motor was always there, and that has shown up in New Orleans as well. But then he tested well. You knew about the things off the field. Was extremely productive down there at FAU. I really, really liked Hendrickson. He was a guy. I was all over the map on these pass rushers because I missed on some and I hit on Hendrickson.
And that's where I was kind of why I didn't love him as much as you did is I thought he was, because you're right about the motor. I mean, the motor just would not quit. He was so relentless, and it felt like almost like he was more hustle than necessarily skill. And that's where I kind of backed off him a little bit. I mean, I still liked him. Where did I have him? I think I had him 4th round. So, like I was a round later than he was actually drafted. But, I thought he was more motor, hard charging guy, the competitive profile was there, but more so, that wasn't going to play as much at the NFL level. But no, I was definitely wrong on that.
And we'll see if he's able to sustain that level of success. I mean, Ben and I focused on the Eagle Eye in the Sky podcast earlier this offseason on all the sacks from TJ Watt, Trey Hendrickson, and who was the third one? There was another rusher. There were all the 3 leaders in sacks this past year. And the motor absolutely was the number one reason why Trey Hendrickson was as productive as he was this past year.
The Philadelphia Eagles are now on Google Home and Amazon Alexa devices. Want to hear Merrill Reese before the season gets underway? Simply say, "Hey Google, talk to Philadelphia Eagles," or "Alexa, open Philadelphia Eagles," and enjoy. Learn more at philadelphiaeagles.com/voice.
All right, let's go to round 4. Best pick for the team that made it. I'll let you kick this one off.
Best pick. Let's stick with pass rusher. This is one of the pass rushers I got right, and that's Carl Lawson. I mean, he still surprised he fell to the 4th round. I know it's probably injury related. He had some injuries at Auburn that were part of his profile as a prospect, but this is a guy who built a little bit differently, just, the way they used him and the way his body was, but he's so ripped. It's just a specimen with his body type. And there were times where, we didn't always see the most thought out rush plan. He needed to be his pass rush would stall at times, but physical hands, you saw that both against the run as a pass rusher. You saw some Brandon Graham to his game a little bit with the way he played, just the play style. So I was a big fan. I thought 1st round possibility in the right scheme. The Bengals just got a steal in the 4th round with him.
I'm going to go with Eddie Jackson. This was a guy that I was really high on when he was coming out of Alabama. Converted corner. I had him as like a top 50 or 60 player in that class. He ended up falling to the 4th round. I know he had the injury. I believe he broke his leg halfway through that senior season, so he couldn't partake in a lot of the pre-draft stuff. So I'm not sure if that was a big part of why he fell. But Eddie Jackson, for me, who turned into a really good player for the Bears, got that 2nd contract already. He is a really good player and got paid as such for the Chicago Bears. I would throw in as another as a backup too, Samson Ebukam, the pass rusher, small school guy for the Rams, who has turned into a starter for them off the edge. Let's go now. Our biggest hit. I'll let you kick things off. Who was your biggest hit from this group?
I'm going to go with Grover Stewart, defensive tackle out of Albany State, who I liked a lot. He was not a combine guy. He was under the radar. I liked him a lot. Now I didn't have him as a 4th. I think I had a 5th, 6th. But I still liked him quite a bit more, where, most people when he was drafted had no idea, who he was or what his talent was. But, a big guy, 6'4.5", 335 pounds. I think, most people don't even know where Albany State is. It's down there in Georgia. But he played good football. His tape was full of flashes. And so you thought, okay, as a rookie, he's going to need some time. But by year 2, this guy is going to be on the field and make an impact. Just a coordinated big man. Just not many people on the planet that size that can move like him. So a big fan of Grover Stewart. And I think the Colts got a good one with him.
Let's go with mine. And to me, this was a tough one. I'm going to go with Tariq Cohen. And to me, I kind of saw, because look, remember, he broke out as that rookie. It was like, oh man, this guy is going to be one of the more dynamic players in the NFL. I believe he made the Pro Bowl. It was either year 1 or year 2. And he's kind of fallen off to this point. But to me, like, I always saw him as the kind of player he is now, which is like that dynamic, like number two, the Robin to David Montgomery's Batman. That's kind of how I saw Tariq Cohen coming out. And I still think that player is a worthwhile selection in the middle of round 4, early day 3. You get an impact role player at that point. I think that that's good value. So to me, I will say that would be my biggest hit there from the 4th round. Kind of a tough one to me, because like I got more misses in this group than I do in hits here in round 4. But to me, like I really love, I mentioned Eddie Jackson. That pick obviously worked out really well, but I would say that Tariq Cohen might be my biggest hit from the rest of round 4. Let's go the opposite way. Let's go swing and a miss, and I'll go to the trenches here. Offensive line. I loved Dorian Johnson on film, the guard from Pitt. I thought he was a top 50 type player, a top 50 type talent in this class. And I understand that he fell because it was like a medical, right? And wasn't it like it was something like unique, right? I forget.
It was like a heart issue or something like that.
Yeah, it was something along those lines. And so he fell in the draft and just not has matched, certainly to the level of player that he was for the Panthers.
Yeah, that's a good one. Because he did fall because of that. If not for that issue, you think he's probably going top 50, top 60. For me, I went with going back to wide receiver, another one, Chad Hansen. I loved him out of Cal. I thought he was productive. He had in 10 games, he had 1,250 yards. 11 touchdowns. He was a walk-on. So, the competitive fire was there, and he left Idaho State to walk on at Cal. So, I mean, he bet on himself. I thought he was an instinctive player, a good enough route runner, good enough athlete. You could be a catch and run type of target. I just didn't see a ton of holes in his game. Was he elite in, several categories? No. But I just didn't see many holes in his game where it was going to hold him back. And, he's been a practice squad guy for the most part of an NFL career. I definitely swung and missed on Chad Hansen.
All right, so for a guy that has exceeded our expectations, I'm going to go Dietrich Wise, the defensive lineman from the Patriots. Coming out of Arkansas, I think my mindset still at that point, Dan, it doesn't seem like that long ago, but it was, spring, offseason 2017. I thought, he's a tweener. Like, he's an inside guy. Is he an inside guy? Is he an outside guy? Like, he's not quite athletic enough to be really impactful off the edge. I don't think that he's really strong enough to really be dominant inside. And in that front with the Patriots, I mean, it's a perfect fit. He really kind of meshes well into what they look for up front and really what a lot of teams look for. I feel like my evaluation of Dietrich Wise here in 2021 would be much different than the one I had in 2016 and 17.
Yep, that's a really good point. And some speaks to, we talk about how fit is so important, and, where these guys end up really could change the trajectory of where they're headed as a player. So no question about that. I'm going to go with back to wide receiver, Josh Reynolds out of Texas A&M, who I liked. I know other people liked him more than I did, but I didn't consider him a top 20 receiver in this class. 6'3", 195. I thought he was a little bit of a one-trick pony. And he's played well. I think he's exceeded my expectations. Last year, 52 catches, 618 yards, only 2 touchdowns. But, he's been a quality receiving target who is not quite been a starter, but he's kind of been on that border where, you figure he might be, one breakout year away from pushing for starter reps, consistent starter reps. So, he's more of a 3-4, but maybe he could be a 2-3, which has exceeded my expectations.
Let's get to round 5 here. The best pick, and there were a couple Pro Bowl players, all pro players in this round. Who was the best one for you round 5?
It's got to be George Kittle. One of the best 5th round picks of all time. The injury stuff at Iowa that kind of soured a lot of teams, didn't have a ton of production. But, he's an ass kicker as a blocker, and he's an above average receiver. And so the value to get him where they got him, just fantastic by the 49ers.
Can I tell you that his evaluation and coming out of that is maybe my biggest learning experience from this class, even more so maybe than Patrick Mahomes, because watching Kittle, I loved George Kittle. And after he started hitting, I remember going back, I'm going to do a Twitter search. I'm going to do the pat myself on the back and retweet something. Nope, nothing. I'm like, let me go back into the podcast and find, nope, nothing. I did not talk about how much I really liked his film nearly enough And obviously, like, there's nothing I can say outside of the fact that I was just, I wasn't willing to put my neck out there for what my thoughts were on him. And I kicked myself for that. And honestly, I've got notes, all like little notes to myself all over my spreadsheet where I take notes on college players where, don't be afraid. Don't ride the fence. Don't be afraid to put your feelings out there on a guy. And honestly, like, George Kittle is one of those players for me where it's like, man, like I wish I was more staunch in my feelings for that player.
I'm the same way. And it's funny because I'm going back and I'm reading my report on him, and it's saying all these things that are, glowing about him, his skill set. He doesn't have an imposing frame, but he's an impressive blocker, stubborn, aggressive. Route athleticism, ball skills. I even wrote that he is a prime candidate to have a better pro career than college career. But then I gave him a 5th round grade. And it's like, oh, well, why? Why did I do that? My report reads higher. And so, yeah, you're absolutely, I'm with you. It's a good learning experience with George Kittle.
Yeah, that's one, like, to this day, like, kick myself over for sure. Your biggest hit outside of Kittle for me, couple linebackers in this one. I ended up like Matt Milano was outstanding value for the Buffalo Bills. He just got paid for them this offseason. I was a little bit higher on Jayon Brown, who was also turned into a good player, a starting linebacker for the Tennessee Titans. Milano, the better player. I wasn't as high on him. I like the versatile skill set, but I really like Jayon Brown. And again, I talked about the Titans a lot. I thought the Titans really hit this one out of the park this class, but a couple of these guys didn't hit. Brown has. And to me, like, I saw a guy that could be a 3-down linebacker, really athletic, instinctive in coverage, undersized, but could still hold up against the run. I would say that would be my biggest hit here from round 5.
Yep, that's a good one. I'm going to go with Damontae Kazee, who, he had a really productive career at San Diego State, 15 interceptions just as a junior and senior. Really, really productive. Was he a safety? Is he a corner? He's still kind of walking that line with the Falcons all those years, now with the Cowboys. So, I think he's outplayed his draft spot. I gave him, I think, a late 3rd round grade, which I think has been more indicative of what he's done as opposed to where he was drafted in the 5th.
Honestly, like, he's a player that I think of when we talk about defensive backs, and whether that's nickels, safeties, corners. When you talk about ball production and toughness, those carry over. Kazee carried that from San Diego State to the Atlanta Falcons in the NFL. And to me, like, I was not high. He was actually my overachiever for this round. I was not as high on Damontae Kazee. He came in and made an impact, like, right away. And so I think for this class, a guy like Cam Bynum with the Minnesota Vikings, where productive, instinctive, really, really tough and physical. He made the transition. It looks like he's making the transition to safety immediately, whereas Kazee, I think it took like a year and change. But that was a guy. He was my overachiever. You beat me on him as well, as you did with the receiver we talked about earlier. Let's go to the next one here. Swing and a miss. For me, this one is an easy one. Nate Peterman, the quarterback from Pitt. I thought this guy could be a starting quarterback, and he's gotten a couple chances here. I just felt like he kind of had a lot of the things I look for when you look at the poise in the pocket, the accuracy, the overall arm talent in terms of, like, the velocity, the willingness to be able to push it downfield wasn't always there, but the decision making didn't carry over from college to the NFL. Wasn't a super long time starter at Pitt, but he was a guy that I would say definitely a swing and a miss. Now, you get a backup quarterback in round 5. That's not a bad selection, overall in terms of value, but he did not reach my personal expectation for what he was going to be in the NFL.
Yeah, he was a tough one because there were, like you pointed out, plenty to like about him. But, his ball placement was up and down. Like, his completion percentage was always around 60%. I thought that kind of matched the tape. But yeah, I think I had a 4th round grade on him. So, to get him in the 5th, I thought, okay, that's pretty good. But yeah, I don't know that he's necessarily reached what we thought. I'm going to go with Roderick Johnson here, who I was bullish on. I thought, okay, you've got a guy here who is raw, no question about that. But 6'6.5", he had 36-inch arms, and he was a really light-footed athlete. Okay, give me those things right there, and we'll kind of figure out the rest. And so he's a 3-year starter at left tackle at Florida State. I thought 5th round, okay, that's great value at that point. It hasn't worked out for him. He's been, more of a backup style, which isn't terrible in the 5th round, but still, I thought he had his upside. I thought was going to be a little bit more than what he's become.
Yeah, definitely a high variance player over the course of his college career. Overachiever, I mentioned mine earlier, was Damontae Kazee. Who was it for you? Who exceeded expectation in round 5?
For me, it's got to be Aaron Jones, the running back out of UTEP. He has been a fantastic player for Green Bay. One of those players that, again, I'm reading his report and I'm like, okay, I liked him. Like, why didn't I have him ranked higher? And kind of disappointed in myself for not maybe believing more in him, because I did really like him as a player. I even wrote in my report, does not have many clear flaws. But I really liked his vision. He was really quick to, read and make a cut and then go. But I thought that, he was going to be a quality runner. I didn't see what he's become with the Packers. So
when you finish the Beast every year, do you have like a list in your mind of like, all right, here are like the 5 best players that I didn't watch, that I didn't like write up? Do you like, for me, like I always have that whenever I finish up doing players. Aaron Jones was one of those guys for me. I actually did not do him when he was at UTEP, and I knew there were a lot of people that were really high on him. We got so wrapped up in the George Kittle conversation earlier. He was actually going to be my selection after Kittle for best pick in the round, and I just kind of glossed over it. Obviously, what he's been, he's been outstanding. A two-way dual threat for the Packers out of the backfield as a runner and as a receiver. You run inside, outside. One of my favorite backs to watch in the NFL. Aaron Jones has turned into a great player. I just did not study him at UTEP. Let's go round 6. The best pick overall. I'm going to go with Xavier Woods, the safety from previously the Dallas Cowboys. I believe he's still in the free agent market. Dane, correct me if I'm wrong. I don't believe he has signed anywhere yet. But
Minnesota, I thought.
Oh, did he? Okay. All right. So
I think, yeah.
I really like Xavier Woods coming out. Like I remember he was a guy, and Louisiana Tech has done such a nice job on the defensive side of putting guys out into the league that have been able to make those impacts. Eagles fans that are listening, and we'll hope that's the case here with Milton Williams. But Xavier Woods, I remember watching him single high, two high, come down, make plays over the top, whether it was in the pass game, run the alley, in the run game, really tough and competitive. To me, like checked so many boxes at the safety spot. He tested pretty well, and he wasn't the biggest. But I think when you looked at the overall skill set, I just saw like, yeah, this guy's going to be a starting safety, and you got him in round 6. And I think that to me, like, yeah, probably my biggest hit, but also like the best overall pick in round 6.
Yeah, no, that's a really good one. And I mean, I was doing live Cowboys coverage during this draft, and we were all pounding the table for Xavier Woods. We actually had the DB coach in the round earlier to do a live talking about Jordan Lewis and Awuzie and Jeff Kavanaugh, our buddy at 105.3 The Fan in Dallas, mentioned to him before we got off and said, hey, Xavier Woods, next round, let's make it happen. Lo and behold, it did happen, and we were going nuts. Now he didn't really turn out to be a long-term starter for Dallas, but he is a quality safety in this league, and a league that really needs more quality safeties. He's one of them. I think Chuck Clark would also qualify for this with what he's become in Baltimore. I went with Chase Roulier for Washington, who I really like to come out of Wyoming. Guard, center versatility, big guy, 6'3.5", 312. I thought he was going to be more suited for like a power scheme, which is with his skill set, relies more on size and power as opposed to being the most mobile guy out there. But just that position versatility, I thought that was something that was going to keep in the league for a long time. He's exceeded my expectations, even so. But I liked him quite a lot. He's actually who I chose for my biggest hit as well.
He was number 2 on my like best guy I did not watch list after that draft. Chase Roulier, and he became a starter very early for the Washington football team. My biggest hit was DJ Jones, the defensive tackle from Ole Miss. I really enjoyed watching him. Kind of a limited player. It was a junior college transfer, so he ends up there at Ole Miss. But I just saw a nose tackle who was really violent against the run, but he had very light feet and he was never on the ground. And he's turned into a really nice role player for the San Francisco 49ers. Again, when you get to this late in the draft, that's kind of what you're looking for. And I think that Jones has really kind of fit the bill there. He's become the kind of player I expected him to be coming into the NFL. Let's go swing and a miss. Who's a guy that you were really high on that didn't live up to the expectation?
I'm going to go with Caleb Brantley here, who I really like to come out of Florida. Defensive lineman who 6'3", 307. Not the most productive player in college, but he was just a rock solid player. And I thought, okay, 3rd round type of guy, you get him in a 6th round. I love the value there. Now, there were times where he would disappear for stretches. He was more of a flash player. And so I thought that he was a guy that you get him to play a little more consistent. he's going to be a starter for you. Unfortunately, he was just never able to reach that ceiling as an NFL player. I think the motor issues really caught up with him. And so that was a good learning experience for me.
Bucky Hodges, the wide receiver, tight end, hybrid player from Virginia Tech. He came on as a quarterback initially, made the transition outside. I thought this guy had the ability to be a really dynamic pass catcher in the league and really quickly fizzled out. I thought they got great value. I believe he went to Minnesota right in the 6th round and just did not make it there with the Vikings. That kind of their kind of selection, by the way, in terms of like the high upside, really, good athletic tester, high upside. Some of those guys hit and some of those guys don't. And Hodges did not hit. Let's go overachiever, a guy that surpassed the expectation. For me, it was Sam Tevi, who the LA Chargers, then the San Diego Chargers selected out of Utah. And look, he had to be a full-time starter last year. Is he a full-time starter? No, in an ideal world, he is not a full-time starter. In round 6, you're not necessarily looking for that. I was not super high on Tevi. That said, he has turned into a fine backup tackle. Tackles are hard to find, and a guy that could be a serviceable at best starter. That's not bad value there in round 6. So I would say that Sam Tevi would be my pick here.
Yep, that's a good one. I'm going with Brandon Wilson, the corner, who I think I gave up on pretty quickly because I'm watching some of his tape. I'm not a fan. But he's been able to stay in the league because of what he does on special teams.
No doubt.
As a return man. He's got a kick return each of the last 2 years. He's been really good in that facet of the game. And that's been able to, keep him on a roster and keep him, as a meaningful player. And so I think that was another good learning experience, and not focusing enough on the special teams aspect, what he brought to the team, as opposed to just focusing on, okay, he's not a great corner. And because of that, it's going to sour my projection. So Brandon Wilson is a guy that's outplayed where I thought he would be at this point.
I mean, how often do we talk about the special teams aspect of that? Yeah. We had devoted like a whole segment back in March to players that, are going to be able to make it due to special teams. And Wilson, he started his career on the offensive side, right? Wasn't he like a running back, wide receiver before making that move to corner as well late?
Right. Yeah. A very different type of career path. Yep. And so, but he tested really well. He was a 4.40, 40 speed. He had that special teams experience. And so, I think that really helped, make sure every single player, I don't care what position. I want to know, okay, how many special team snaps did he make an impact? And not just, assuming he did or he didn't, just really diving in, making sure we know the full scope of everything that he did in college.
Let's go to round 7, final one here, Dane. Best pick. I'll let you kick things off. Who was your the best pick overall in the 7th round?
This is a little different, but we got to give our special teams. Speaking of special teams, you have to give our kickers some love. Harrison Butker.
Here we go.
Who for Kansas City wasn't drafted by Kansas City, right, but he's been a really, really good player for the Chiefs, and been a guy that I think he set the NFL rookie record for field goals in his first year. He obviously the Chiefs and Mahomes and that offense has really kind of helped shine a light on him, but he's, kind of stepped up, and whether it's, making field goals from distance and, being consistent enough where, he's, being a big part of that team. I mean, I think he was responsible for all the points scored in the Super Bowl this past year against the Buccaneers. So there's a lot to like about, we don't give kickers enough love, but he's one of the probably top 5 kickers in the league right now.
Yeah, and not to mention, not the only kicker that has gone on to star for the team that did not draft him. Jake Elliott was selected by the Bengals in this draft. Obviously went on to work with the Philadelphia Eagles in his rookie season. Did not make the Bengals, was on the practice squad. The Eagles scooped him up after an injury, and he was their kicker onto the Super Bowl run there in the 2017 season. For me, I'm going to go to the running back spot. Chris Carson. This running back class just loaded. There's so many guys up and down the draft board, but Chris Carson has turned into a really good player, especially for a 7th round pick. That's what you're looking for, and more of a the committee back, between the tackles, downhill. He's got soft hands, but not a dynamic athlete. But that's a really good pick there in round 7. Whenever he's been healthy, he's a formidable back in that Seahawks backfield. It really kind of fits the image of what Pete Carroll wants that offense to look like. Let's go to our biggest hit personally. I'll come back to you. What was your biggest hit here in the 7th round?
Going back to receiver, Noah Brown out of Ohio State, who, has not been a necessarily great player for the Cowboys, kind of been lost on that wide receiver depth chart a little bit, but when he's gotten chances, he's been productive on offense, but even more so on special teams. Yep. That's really what is keeping Noah Brown on that roster, is what he brings to special teams, the comfort level that the coaches have. And that means, we just got done talking about it last segment. I mean, with special teams ability, that means a lot. And that was one of the big reasons I loved Noah Brown at Ohio State. He had that broken leg. I think it was his second year on campus. And then, average results his third year, and then he bolted. He left after his sophomore year, redshirt sophomore year. So, you thought, okay, there's some untapped potential here. At the very least, I know he's going to be an awesome blocker. He's going to help me out on special teams. And I think so far he's kind of been exactly as advertised for the Cowboys.
His blocking melt was awesome. I mean, there were some awesome crack blocks from him in college. And again, that gives you that faith that, not only, this guy can be a blocker on screens and stuff like that. It's not necessarily that. He's got the mentality to be a really good special teamer. If you're drafting a height, weight, speed athlete, which is what Noah Brown was, with potential with the floor as a special teamer, that a lot of people are looking for that kind of a profile late in day 3. And that's exactly what Noah Brown brought to the table. That's a really good hit there. For me, I'm going to go Northwestern pass rusher Ifeadi Odenigbo rather. I watched him late. It was like late March, early April that spring. And I remember, this guy's got some juice, and he could shift inside. He can come off the edge, and he's been slowly stealing more and more and more reps for the Vikings since he's been there in Minnesota. And he's really kind of carved out a nice little niche role as that kind of, for one of the first guys off the bench on that defensive front, can line up in a couple of different techniques and win. To me, that was my biggest hit there in the 7th round. Let's go opposite side. Who was a swing and a miss for you from the 7th round of the draft?
Isaiah Ford, coming out of Virginia Tech. I really liked him. I thought maybe he could develop into like a Tyler Boyd type where, work him out of the slot, the short area quickness. I just thought he was very quarterback friendly, where he made himself available at all times, and a guy that could work the middle of the field. There's just a lot to like about his toughness, about his dependability. And, unfortunately, it just has not worked out for him. He was not the fastest guy. He ran a 4.61 at the combine. And unfortunately, I think that's just made it tough for him to uncover and find a consistent role in the NFL. So I think he's the guy that was a swing and a miss for me.
Yeah, for me, like Stacey Coley from Miami with the Minnesota Vikings kind of fit that same bill. A lot of the things you said. I kind of felt that Stacey Coley had that ability to stick as, maybe at best like a number 3 or 4 or 5. And he's been kind of fit in that role. I just expected him to be a little bit more. I expected, hey, like this guy could be, maybe one of the 3rd or 4th best pass catchers, regardless of position in an NFL offense. Hasn't quite fit that. Let's go last category here. Overachiever, a guy that has lived past that expectation. I'm going to go with Adrian Colbert, the safety, who has carved out a really nice role with the Patriots in that secondary. Safety, nickel. He had some experience at corner early in his college career as well. He has surpassed my expectation when he was coming out. And honestly, this category was tough to do in the 7th round. But for me, I would say that would be the one that fits most.
I went with David Moore, who
good one.
I did not. I heard his name, but I did not. He's one of those guys I did not have time to do.
Yeah. Yep.
And I think really it was his pro day that really kind of ascended him, because he was 6 foot 220, ran a 4.43 40-yard dash, sub 7 seconds in the 3 cone. And obviously, in the 7th round, you're kind of throwing darts. Seattle took a chance, turned out to be, a steal at that point, a guy that's stuck on the roster. Yeah, exactly. And so he's been a guy that's exceeded where he was drafted and where I think almost everybody thought he would be.
Yeah, it's he again, classic Seahawks pick in terms of that upside selection, throwing darts there late in the draft. Well, Dane, 7 rounds in, 7 rounds down. What'd you think? Again, kind of a fun exercise. And I do this a little bit more in depth when you're kind of like internalizing this over the course of a couple of months. But just some of the things you try and do to keep you on your toes as you get ready for the next season.
Yeah, and this draft was a little painful because the quarterbacks, it was such a disaster year for me, quarterback wise. But honestly, I'm very, very happy that it happened, because I learned so much from it. Just in terms of my process, in terms of certain traits that maybe I overrated or underrated. And I know that I'm a much better evaluator now because of doing exercises like this, where you don't hide from your mistakes. You attack them, and you learn why. And so an exercise like this really helps go back and revisit it. And I've got a similar thing coming out this week on The Athletic.
Nice.
I go back to the 2018 draft.
Okay.
And so 3 years removed and look at that class and do something similar. I'm going to power rank all 32 teams based off of what they did in that draft. And it's really interesting to do. And so, yeah, this is a really good idea because it's fun.
Yeah, this is always a fun exercise. Well, Dane will be checking out that piece on the 2018 draft later this week over on The Athletic. Make sure you're following Dane on Twitter at DP Brugler. Dane, we'll talk to you in a couple weeks right here on the Journey to the Draft podcast presented by Life Brand.
Now it's time to hear from you, the fans, in the draft mailbag.
All right, well, fun exercise as always, like I mentioned there with Dane Brugler. So only one comment here from our draft mailbag, which shows a comment over on our Apple Podcast page. Again, that's the number one way to throw us your support is go on to wherever you listen, especially if it's Apple Podcasts. Leave us a review, leave us a rating. And CMart923 checked in a 5-star review saying, "Hey, Fran, I wanted to thank you for shouting out my mock draft in the latest episode. It definitely shows how much time you put into this. To see you going back to mocks submitted by your listeners, you're definitely right. I was really happy with the Eagles draft haul, and I look forward to seeing how they do and where they fit in as we move towards training camp and get to see them in the preseason. I look forward to all of your offseason content and getting ready to dive into the 2022 draft prospects. It's always draft season, Chris." So Chris, thanks so much for checking in. Thanks for listening to that episode. To me, I love all the content. When you guys send us in questions and you guys send us in comments, I say that every single week on this segment. Not only does that help the show, but I love hearing from everybody and hearing your opinions and hearing your questions and giving feedback to you guys. And it's always fun, too, when you guys get stuff right. I keep track of all that. I keep all the receipts. So I was glad that I was able to point to your mock draft where I think you correctly predicted 3 or 4 of the Eagles selection. So shout out to you as well. But really for everybody, again, the best way to throw us your support, and we'll always shout you out. If it's a mock draft, if it's a question, if you've got a question about the process or a specific prospect, whatever it is, you can go and leave that over on our Apple Podcast page, and we will always hit on it. We've done full episodes based off questions you've had, literally, especially this time of year, here in the dog days of June and July, as we're gearing up for those 2022 previews. If you've got a question about something about the entire process, now is the time. And we're going to be starting some big picture kind of episodes here over the next few weeks. So make sure you stay tuned right here on the Journey to the Draft podcast. Thanks so much to Dane Brugler. Thanks so much to all of you at home. We'll be back later this week. I've got a great interview lined up with Austin Gale from over at Pro Football Focus. Stay tuned right here on the Journey to the Draft podcast presented by Life Brand.
Introducing Season 2 of the Return Game podcast, Birds, Boys, and Bad Blood, presented by NovaCare Rehabilitation. When it comes to the Eagles-Cowboys rivalry, you think you know the whole story, but there is more, so much more, and we're about to uncover it all. And I think back to some of my favorite memories in the rivalry, and I remember exactly where I was, who I was with, what I was doing for so many of these games. Lito Shepard's interception to ruin T.O.'s return to Philly. I remember leaping off the couch in my house where I grew up and nearly punching the ceiling. I jumped so high. The pickle juice game. I was actually on a family vacation in Disney World. We made sure we were back at our hotel so that we did not miss that game. 44-6. I remember I was watching that game from a bar near the mall where I was finishing up Christmas shopping earlier that day. I was with one of my best friends. Obviously, we couldn't miss the game, so we made sure we were geared up. We had a good spot in front of a big screen. We went through 18 plates of appetizers that day. And I have these memories because these games meant so much and continue to mean so much to us as Eagles fans. So if you want to relish some of those great moments in the rivalry, be sure to go subscribe to Return Game, an Eagles Entertainment original podcast. Subscribe now wherever you listen to podcasts.